All right.
Please introduce yourself to the jury.
I'm Ron Schnell.
And what is your current job title, Mr. Schnell?
I'm a director at Berkeley Research Group.
And could you briefly describe your educational background since high school?
I have a master's degree in computer science.
Do you have an undergraduate degree?
I do not.
And can you explain to the jury why not?
When I was a kid, there was a lot of publicity about me because I was a professor at NYU. When I was 14, NYU actually offered me to go into their freshman class when I was 14, but I decided that I wanted to experience the social aspect of high school, so I turned them down, but by the time I got to college, they skipped me from undergraduate to graduate.
So when did you receive your master's degree from Syracuse University?
It wasn't until 2008, actually.
And why wasn't it until 2008?
So because of my previous background while I was at Syracuse, including I did work at MIT in the artificial intelligence lab for the two founders of artificial intelligence, Patrick Winston and Marvin Minsky. I was immediately lured to industry even while I was in graduate school, and eventually they offer you enough money where you have to take them up on it.
So when you were lured away from Syracuse University, what did you do?
I worked at Bell Labs on something called the Unix operating system. Unix is an operating system, which is the core of the computer, what makes everything work. Microsoft Windows is an operating system. Mac OS is an operating system. You may have heard of Linux, which is, Unix was the predecessor to Linux. So I worked on the kernel of the Unix operating system at Bell Labs.
And when was that approximately? What year?
1986.
And how long did you work at Bell Labs?
A couple of years.
And what did you do after Bell Labs?
After that, I was lured away to IBM. So I worked at IBM on their version of the Unix operating system, which was called AIX, also working on the kernel and managing other programmers working on the kernel.
And can you just briefly explain what the kernel is?
Right, the kernel is the center of the operating system, so it actually controls the piece of software that controls the whole computer. So it gets down to the bit level where it's actually really everything that goes on in the computer has to go through the kernel.
And what did you do after IBM?
After IBM, I founded a startup company.
What was the name of that startup company?
It's called Secure Online Systems.
And what did Secure Online Systems do?
It was a company that wrote software for mainframe computers running the various versions of the Unix operating system.
And were there any other investors in Secure Online Systems, Inc.?
Yeah. My business partner in that was Sylvester Stallone.
And what eventually happened to Secure Online Systems?
Well, it was, as I said, a software product that ran on mainframe computers running Unix. And we actually completed the product, and it ran very well. But mainframes running Unix kind of ceased to exist back then, so we had to shut it down.
So what did you do after the company shut down?
Then I went to work at Sun Microsystems, working on their version of Unix, which is called Solaris, also working on the kernel.
And approximately how long were you there at Sun?
Approximately 5 years.
And did you also work for Drivers Aces, Inc.?
Right. Coincident with that, I also founded another startup called Driver Aces, and we wrote what are called device drivers to run on the Unix operating systems. A device driver actually teaches the computer how to talk to hardware devices, so it also runs within the kernel.
Have you founded any other startups?
Yes.
What was the other startup? What was at least one of the other startups?
So the last startup I founded was called mailcall.com, M-A-I-L, and that was a startup that allowed you to read and manage your email on your cellular phone before there were smartphones. So a computerized voice would read your email, and you could speak a reply into the phone or send it to a fax machine, basically let you manage your email on the road.
And what happened to mailcall.com?
I sold that to a public company in 2000.
And what did you do after that?
After that, I ended up working at Equifax, one of the 3 credit bureaus in the United States, running software development for their internet marketing division.
And how long were you in that position?
Until 2005.
Yeah.
Although since COVID, I haven't been doing that.
And have you published any scholarly articles?
Yes, I have 2 published articles, one related to computer security and another relating to antitrust enforcement using technology.
And what experience do you have in statistical or forensic analysis of social media?
A bunch of the consulting work I've done involves analyzing data from social media. Most of them have been consulting for litigation. Some of them are consulting for non-litigation. Yeah.
And is that work both in civil and criminal matters?
Yes.
And could you describe the work just a bit more in terms of what you've performed regarding statistical or forensic analysis of social media?
I can't talk about the specific cases because I haven't testified on them, and some of them are awaiting indictment, most likely. But in general, it's really the same sort of stuff I've been doing here, analyzing data from the social networks.
And what social media platforms have you performed forensic analysis?
All of the major ones.
What are the major ones?
Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Reddit.
How much of your expert work is for plaintiffs versus work for defendants?
Well, I don't consider myself working for either plaintiff or defendant. I take my role as an independent expert extremely seriously. But looking at whose counsel has hired me over the 9 or so years I've been doing this, it's almost exactly equal.
And how many times have you been a consulting expert?
Including litigation and non-litigation, hundreds.
How many times have you been qualified in court, arbitration, or in sworn court testimony to provide expert testimony?
8 times.
Have you ever been disqualified as an expert by a court?
No.
Do you believe that your testimony will be helpful in assisting the jury understand the facts of this case?
I do.
Your Honor, at this time, I tender Mr. Schnell as an expert in the fields of statistical and forensic analysis of social media.
Any objection?
Your Honor, can we be heard?
Do you want to voir dire?
Yes, I do.
Okay, you can voir dire.
Thanks. Sir, my name's Wayne Dennison. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You made here an analysis of certain tweets and hashtags, right?
Right.
And you made no effort to connect those tweets and hashtags to the statements being made by Ann Waldman.
I'll sustain the objection that voir dire is just for his qualifications as an expert.
Can we be heard, Your Honor?
If you want to come forward, that's fine. All right. So, Mr. Dennison, do you have any objection to him moving in as an expert?
No.
All right. Then I'll move him in as an expert in statistical and forensic analysis of social media. Okay? Yes, sir. Your question.
Mr. Schnell, what were you asked to do in this matter?
So I was asked to do several things. I used the official Twitter APIs to bring in data over several different time spans. Initially, it was April of 2020 to January 2021, and analyzed various hashtags and things like that.
And what is significant about April 2020?
I understand that April 2020 is related to the alleged defamatory statements by Mr. Waldman.
And you talked about APIs. What does that mean?
So API stands for Application Programming Interface. That is a service that's provided by companies like Twitter so that professionals can write programs to query Twitter to ask for various things. In this case, I use two of their APIs. One of them is called the Search API, and that allows you to give search terms, and it will return all the tweets containing those search terms through a certain date range. The other one is called a Counts API, and I use that, again, through a certain date range to return any tweet that contained that hashtag. And I should add that it may not be obvious why you need to do this, but if you just do a search on Twitter itself, it's not going to return everything. It's going to return a subset of what is out there. But using these APIs, which you pay a lot of money for, they sort of guarantee that you'll almost guarantee that you'll get everything.
And you mentioned hashtags. I know a lot of people know what those are, but for those who don't, what's a hashtag?
Well, hashtags are a function of Twitter. They're really just part of the text of a tweet or profile, and it's convenient to put things in hashtags so that when somebody searches, they can search for a particular hashtag and it'll come up.
And did you choose particular hashtags to search for?
I did.
And how did you choose which hashtags to use?
Well, initially I was looking at tweets that would be negative towards Ms. Heard. So I looked through tweets that were negative towards Ms. Heard, and I found that a super majority of them were using one of four different hashtags.
And so overall, what did your analysis find regarding negative hashtags about Ms. Heard from April 2020 until the end of January 2021?
Well, there were over 1,243,000 and change uses of those hashtags during that time frame you just mentioned.
And did you perform an analysis of the negative hashtags from April 2020 until January 2022?
Yes, I did.
And what was the result of that?
There were over another million, so 2.38 million, I think.
And how did you determine that the tweets were negative about Ms. Heard?
Well, I hadn't been asked that until later on in this, but I didn't think that would be in controversy. I mean, some of these hashtags are pretty rude, and it would really surprise me that anyone would think that they wouldn't be negative towards Ms. Heard. But when I was asked about it later, I actually took a random sampling and looked at them and could not find any that were not negative towards Ms. Heard.
And what was the random sampling that you used?
I did two of them. They were 1,000 each.
And how did you determine which 1,000 tweets to use to review in each search?
I wrote a program that truly selected them at random.
And in your experience, is 2,000 tweets a meaningful sample?
If they're chosen at random in this universe, yes.
Okay. In addition to the 4 hashtags for Ms. Heard, did you review any other? Did you look at any other hashtags?
I did.
And what type of hashtags did you look for?
I looked at what I found to be 6 hashtags that would be negative towards Mr. Depp.
Okay, but Michelle, could you put up demonstrative 1, which is on the 5th page of attachment 4 of Mr. Schnell's expert designation. Mr. Schnell, did you create this chart?
I did.
And what data is this chart based on?
This is based on the search API from Twitter, and it rolls up the number of tweets with the various hashtags by month of these 2 years. 3 years.
Your Honor, I'd like to make this a demonstrative Schnell demonstrative 1, or do you want it to be
If I could get it one of the numbers, since it's going to be part of the record, just
Okay. Can we call it Schnell demonstrative 1, and then I will give you a number?
the last number I have is 1837. I don't know.
Do we know if that's the last?
Can
Can we make it? How about we make it 1900? That way, it's not. Can we just make it 1900?
That's perfect.
Okay.
All right, 1900 it is. Any objections to demonstrative?
No, Your Honor.
All right, you can publish that.
And is this a chart you made, Mr. Schnell?
It is.
Okay. And at the top here, there are hashtags that are in yellow. You see that?
I do.
Okay. And if we go all the way to the right, well, first let's scroll over to the left here. I apologize. You see, in 2020, there's the months of June and July.
I do.
Okay. And what are these columns? First, tell the jury what they represent.
So each of these is the number of tweets with